Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Return. Julius Holt had built his empire with iron fists and calculated precision. At 45, he commanded respect in every boardroom and fear in every negotiation. His construction company had transformed half the city's skyline, each building a testament to his relentless ambition. But for 3 years, none of that had mattered. His daughter Sarah had vanished without a trace during a family camping trip, leaving behind only questions and a grief that had slowly hardened into something far more dangerous. The Coast Guard's call came on a Tuesday morning that changed everything. They'd found her, alive, somehow surviving alone on a remote island 60 miles off the coast. Julius had driven to the hospital with hands that trembled for the first time in decades, his mind racing between relief and rage at the lost years. Sarah looked nothing like the carefree 16-year-old who had disappeared. Now 19, she was lean and scarred, her eyes holding secrets that made Julius's chest tighten. But when she grabbed his arm in that hospital bed, her grip was strong, desperate. "They're coming for you, Dad. Leave the town before morning," she whispered, glancing frantically at the door. "I heard them talking. They think I'm dead. They planned it all." "Who, Sarah? Who planned what?" Julius kept his voice steady, but inside, something cold and familiar was awakening. The same calculating fury that had destroyed business rivals who dared to cross him. "Mom and Uncle Henry," Sarah's voice broke. "They didn't just want me gone, Dad. They wanted me dead. The boat, it wasn't an accident." Julius felt the world shift beneath him. Henry Jackson, his wife Caroline's supposed cousin, his business partner of 8 years, the man he'd trusted with both his company and his family. The man who'd helped search for Sarah, who'd comforted Caroline through her grief, The pieces clicked together with brutal clarity. Henry Jackson wasn't Caroline's cousin. The intimate looks Julius had dismissed, the late-night business meetings, the way Caroline had insisted Henry help with the boat that day. It had all been orchestrated. As Julius left the hospital and walked toward the parking garage, his phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. "Coming to see Sarah. Meet me there." But when the elevator doors opened to the parking level, Julius stopped cold. Standing by his black Mercedes, silhouetted against the dim fluorescent lights, was Henry Jackson. But he wasn't alone. 3 men in dark suits flanked him, and the way they moved told Julius everything he needed to know about their intentions. Henry's smile was cold when he spotted Julius. "Funny thing about islands, Julius. Sometimes people wash up on them. Sometimes they wash off them. Permanently." Julius felt the familiar surge of predatory calm that had served him well in countless hostile takeovers. These fools had no idea who they were threatening. They'd taken 3 years from him, tried to murder his daughter, and now they thought they could finish what they'd started. "Gentlemen," Julius said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had built his empire, "I believe you have me at a disadvantage." But as the men moved closer, Julius was already calculating. The security cameras, the exit routes, the weight of the tire iron in his trunk. They'd made their first mistake by underestimating him. It would be their last. Chapter 2. The Predator Awakens. Julius Holt hadn't survived 30 years in construction by backing down from threats. As Henry's men closed in, Julius's mind shifted into the cold, analytical mode that had made him fortune and feared in equal measure. The parking garage had become a chessboard, and these amateurs were about to learn why Julius had never lost a game that mattered. "You know, Henry," Julius said, stepping slowly toward his car, "I always wondered why you were so eager to take Sarah on that boat trip." Generous uncle, looking out for his niece. His hand moved casually toward his key fob. "Tell me, how long have you been fucking my wife?" Henry's confident mask slipped for just a moment. "Julius, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Julius pressed the panic button on his key fob. The Mercedes alarm shrieked through the parking garage, its lights strobing. "Security will be here in 90 seconds. That gives us time to chat." The men hesitated, looking to Henry for direction. In that moment of uncertainty, Julius struck. He'd learned long ago that violence, like business, was about timing and overwhelming force. His steel-toed boot connected with the nearest man's knee, dropping him instantly. The tire iron from his trunk found the second man's temple before he could draw whatever weapon he was reaching for. Henry stumbled backward, pulling out a gun with shaking hands. "You crazy bastard. You don't know what you're doing." I know exactly what I'm doing. Julius's voice was deadly calm as he advanced, the tire iron still in his hand. I'm ending this. All of it. But instead of fear, Henry's eyes suddenly filled with malicious triumph. You can't touch me, Julius. Kill me, and you'll never find out where Caroline really is, or what we have planned for tomorrow. The security guard's footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Julius made his choice with the same cold calculation he'd used to destroy competitors for decades. He stepped back, letting the tire iron clatter to the ground. Mr. Holt. The security guard rounded the corner, taking in the scene. Two men groaning on the ground, Henry with a gun, Julius standing calmly with his hands visible. What happened here? Attempted robbery, Julius said smoothly. I fought back. I believe Mr. Jackson here was trying to help, but things got out of hand. His eyes never left Henry's face. Isn't that right, Henry? Henry looked confused, then realized the trap Julius had just set. If he contradicted the story, he'd have to explain why he was in the parking garage with armed men. If he agreed, he'd have to play along with Julius's narrative. That's right, Henry said slowly, lowering the gun. I came to check on Julius after hearing about Sarah. Found these men threatening him. As the police arrived and took statements, Julius maintained his composure. But inside, his mind was already working on a different kind of construction project, one that would systematically demolish Henry Jackson and Caroline Fox piece by piece. That night, alone in his study, Julius opened a secure laptop and began making calls. The same network of contacts that had helped him acquire prime real estate and crush business rivals would now serve a different purpose. Private investigators, security specialists, and a few individuals whose services weren't advertised in any yellow pages. By dawn, Julius had a complete dossier on Henry Jackson's real background, Caroline's financial activities, and most importantly, their plan for the next day. What he discovered made his blood run cold, and his resolve absolute. Chapter 3. The Architect of Revenge. The truth was worse than Julius had imagined. Henry Jackson wasn't just Caroline's lover. He was a convicted con artist who'd served time for insurance fraud before carefully crafting his new identity. Caroline hadn't been seduced. She'd been his partner from the beginning, playing the role of grieving mother while they systematically siphoned money from Julius's accounts and set up their escape plan. Sarah's accident had been the first phase. Eliminate the daughter who might inherit everything. Make it look tragic, and let Julius's grief make him vulnerable. Tomorrow, they planned to trigger a massive insurance claim on his company's latest project, a 50-story downtown tower, using strategically placed explosives to cause a construction accident that would kill Julius and net them millions. Julius sat in his private office at 3 a.m., reviewing the evidence his contacts had gathered. Security footage of Caroline and Henry together months before Sarah's disappearance. Financial records showing the gradual theft of nearly $2 million. Audio recordings from a bug his investigator had placed in Henry's apartment, detailing their timeline for the morning's planned explosion. But what sealed their fate was the final recording. Caroline laughing as she described watching Sarah's boat sink, believing the girl had drowned. The little brat never suspected a thing. Caroline's voice crackled through the speakers. She actually thanked Henry for teaching her to use the life vest properly. Julius turned off the recording and made his final call of the night. Glenn, it's Julius. I need you to round up the old crew. All of them. We have a job that requires traditional methods. Glenn Pierce had worked for Julius for 15 years, handling the kind of problems that couldn't be solved in boardrooms. His team had cleared land for construction projects by convincing stubborn property owners to sell, dealt with union organizers who got too ambitious, and ensured that competing bids mysteriously fell through when necessary. How traditional are we talking, boss? Glenn's gravelly voice carried no judgment, only professional interest. Traditional enough that our problems won't resurface, Julius replied. But I want them to understand exactly why it's happening. Education before elimination. As dawn broke over the city, Julius implemented the first phase of his own construction project. The building site that Henry and Caroline planned to destroy became the foundation for something else entirely, a carefully engineered trap that would give them exactly what they deserved. Julius arrived at the construction site at 6 a.m., greeting his foreman Omar Lloyd with his usual professional demeanor. But Omar, who'd worked with Julius for 12 years, noticed the difference immediately. There was something in his boss's eyes that reminded him of a wolf that had caught a scent. Omar, I need you to evacuate the upper floors of the tower. Gas leak inspection. Make sure everyone's clear by 8 a.m. But boss, the inspectors aren't scheduled until. They are now. Julius handed him a clipboard with official-looking paperwork that hadn't existed the night before. And Omar, when Mr. Jackson arrives, make sure he goes straight up to the 40th floor. He'll be expecting to meet me there. As workers began the evacuation, Julius positioned himself in the construction trailer that served as the site office. Through the windows, he had a perfect view of the building and the street where Caroline would park her car, exactly where she'd planned to watch her husband die. At 7:45 a.m., Henry's truck pulled up to the site. Julius watched through binoculars as Henry retrieved a duffel bag from the bed, undoubtedly containing the explosives meant to bring down the tower. Henry moved with nervous excitement, checking his watch repeatedly. He was early, eager to begin the day that would make him rich and free. At 7:52 a.m., Caroline's blue sedan parked across the street, positioned for the perfect view of the disaster she expected to witness. She stayed in the car, phone in hand, ready to call emergency services and play the devastated widow. At 8 a.m., Julius walked out of the trailer and straight toward the building entrance, where Henry was waiting with barely concealed anticipation. Julius, Henry called out, his voice artificially cheerful. Ready for the big inspection? I've got all the equipment we'll need. I'm sure you do, Julius replied, studying Henry's face. Tell me, Henry, do you believe in justice? Justice? Henry looked confused. What kind of question is that? The kind you're about to answer personally, Julius said, stepping aside as Glenn Pierce and 3 other men emerged from behind a concrete mixer. Henry's face went white as he recognized the expressions on their faces, the same look Julius wore when he was about to destroy a competitor permanently. Chapter 4, The Foundation. Henry Jackson's confidence crumbled as Glenn Pierce stepped forward, removing the duffel bag of explosives from his nerveless fingers. Julius had seen that same look of dawning horror on countless business rivals over the years, the moment they realized they'd been outmaneuvered by someone who played the game better than they ever could. You see, Henry, Julius said conversationally, the thing about being in construction is that you learn to build things to last. Strong foundations, careful planning, attention to every detail. He gestured toward the tower rising above them. But you also learn how to tear things down. Systematically. Completely. Glenn opened the duffel bag, revealing not just explosives but detailed blueprints of the building, timer devices, and even a typed manifesto meant to be found after Julius's death, painting him as a businessman driven to suicide by guilt over cutting safety corners that led to his daughter's death. Thorough. Julius nodded approvingly. I respect good planning, even when it's aimed at me. But there's one thing you didn't account for in your blueprint, Henry. What's that? Henry's voice was barely a whisper. I built this tower. Every beam, every cable, every support structure was designed to my specifications. Did you really think I wouldn't know if someone tried to rig it to fall? The truth was, Julius had known about the planned sabotage for hours. His security system had detected Henry's previous visits to the site, the unauthorized access to restricted floors, even the small test holes Henry had drilled to determine the best placement for his charges. Julius's people had been watching, learning, preparing. Glenn, take our friend upstairs. I want him to see exactly where he planned to put those charges. Education first, remember? As Glenn and his men escorted Henry into the building, Julius turned his attention to the blue sedan across the street. Caroline sat inside, checking her watch, completely unaware that her carefully orchestrated plan was already falling apart. Julius walked across the street and tapped on her window. Caroline's face lit up with artificial concern when she saw him. Julius, thank God you're all right. I was so worried when I heard about the inspection. Is everything safe? Perfectly safe, Julius replied, opening her car door. In fact, I think you should come see for yourself. Henry's upstairs showing me some structural concerns he discovered. Caroline hesitated for just a moment, a flicker of uncertainty that confirmed Julius's suspicions. But she was committed to her role now, trapped by her own deception. Of course, she said, stepping out of the car. I want to make sure you're not taking any unnecessary risks. Especially after everything we've been through with Sarah. Julius guided her into the building, his hand resting lightly on her back. To any observer, they looked like a concerned couple, united by tragedy and moving forward together. But Caroline couldn't see the cold calculation in Julius's eyes, or the way his fingers pressed just slightly too hard against her spine. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was silent except for the mechanical hum of the cables. Caroline stared at the numbers climbing higher, her breathing slightly elevated. Julius wondered if she was nervous about the height, or about something else entirely. When the doors opened, they found Henry standing near the eastern wall of the unfinished floor, surrounded by Julius's men. Glenn had laid out the contents of the duffel bag on a makeshift table: explosives, timers, and the detailed plan for Julius's murder. "Caroline," Henry said, his voice tight with fear. "I think we need to." "You need to explain," Julius interrupted, his voice cutting through the space like a blade. "Both of you. Starting with why my daughter spent 3 years on an island, believing she was dead to the world." Caroline's mask finally slipped. The concerned wife disappeared, replaced by something harder and more calculating. "How did you find out?" "The same way I find out everything that matters. I pay attention. I investigate. I prepare." Julius walked slowly around them, like a predator circling wounded prey. "Did you really think you could steal from me, murder my daughter, plan my death, and I wouldn't notice?" "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Caroline said, her voice gaining strength as she abandoned the pretense. "You were never supposed to find her. She should have drowned with the boat." The admission hung in the air like poison. Julius had known the truth, but hearing her say it out loud crystallized something inside him. A cold, final decision that felt like the last beam being set in place. "Glenn," Julius said quietly, "I want you to wire this floor exactly as Henry planned. Same charges, same timers. But with one modification." "What's that, boss?" Julius looked at Caroline and Henry, studying their faces as understanding dawned. "Set the timer for 60 minutes. And make sure they're both here to appreciate the craftsmanship when it goes off." Chapter 5. The Blueprint of Betrayal. Caroline and Henry's defiance cracked as the reality of their situation sank in. Julius watched with the same detached interest he'd shown when observing demolition crews prepare a building for destruction. Everything had to be done precisely, methodically, with no room for error. "You can't do this," Caroline said, but her voice lacked conviction. "People will ask questions. Sarah will know." "Sarah already knows," Julius interrupted. "She's the one who told me about your plan. 3 years on that island gave her plenty of time to piece together what really happened. Amazing what a 19-year-old can remember when she's fighting for survival every day." He pulled out his phone and played a recording, Sarah's voice, clear and strong despite the pain it must have caused her to speak. "Dad, I remember everything now. The way Mom insisted I go on the boat that day. How Uncle Henry kept checking the life vests, but only put the defective one on me. The hole they drilled in the hull. I heard them talking afterward, when they thought I was drowning. Mom said I was finally out of the way." Caroline's face went white. "She's lying. She's confused, traumatized. She's alive," Julius said simply. "Which is more than you planned for her. More than you planned for me." Glenn's men had finished setting the charges exactly as Henry had designed them. The irony wasn't lost on Julius. They would die by the same method they'd intended for him, in the same building they'd planned to bring down. 55 minutes, Glenn announced, checking the timer. Julius turned to Henry, who was trembling against the eastern wall. "Tell me, Henry, how long were you planning this? How long have you been fucking my wife and plotting to kill my family?" Henry tried to maintain some dignity, but his voice cracked. 2 years. It started as just the affair. But then Caroline showed me your financial records, the insurance policies, the will. The money was just sitting there, and you were so busy with your projects. So you decided to eliminate the obstacles?" Julius nodded. "Sarah first, because she'd inherit everything. Then me, because the insurance would pay out to Caroline as my widow. Clean, efficient. I almost admire the simplicity." Caroline had moved closer to Henry, their partnership evident even now. "We could split the money with you," she said desperately. "There's enough for all of us. We could disappear, start over somewhere else." Julius laughed, a sound devoid of humor that echoed off the concrete walls. "Caroline, you still don't understand. This isn't about money. This was never about money." "Then what?" Henry demanded. "Respect," Julius said. You stole from me. You tried to murder my daughter. You planned to kill me. But worst of all, you thought I was weak enough to let you get away with it." Julius walked to the window, looking out over the city he'd helped build. 40 stories below, construction workers were beginning their day, unaware of the drama playing out above them. "In my business, reputation is everything. When people hear that Julius Holt was betrayed by his wife and business partner, what do you think they'll conclude? That he was weak? Naive? A man who couldn't protect his own family? He turned back to face them. But when they hear that Julius Holt discovered the betrayal and eliminated the threat completely, what will they think then?" 45 minutes, Glenn announced. Julius nodded to his men, who began filing toward the elevator. "We'll leave you two to enjoy the view. I'm told that the eastern exposure is particularly spectacular in the morning light." "Wait." Caroline rushed toward him, but Glenn stepped smoothly into her path. "Julius, please. I'm still your wife. We have history together." "We had history," Julius corrected. "Past tense. The moment you decided my daughter should die, you ended that history. Everything since then has just been cleanup." As the elevator doors began to close, Henry made one last desperate attempt. "The police will investigate. They'll know it wasn't an accident." "Will they?" Julius asked. A floor collapses during a gas leak inspection, killing a known con artist and his accomplice who were discovered attempting to sabotage the building. The same con artist who tried to rob me in a parking garage yesterday. The security footage will show them entering the building together, carrying suspicious equipment. The doors closed on their horrified faces. 35 minutes, Glenn said as they descended. Julius pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Detective Walsh, this is Julius Holt. I need to report a break-in at my construction site." "Yes, I'm afraid it's that Henry Jackson again. He's here with my wife, and I believe they're trying to sabotage the building." "No, I'm evacuating now. I suggest you send the bomb squad." By the time they reached ground level, police sirens were already wailing in the distance. Julius walked calmly to his Mercedes, started the engine, and drove exactly 4 blocks before pulling into a parking structure and walking to the roof. The explosion, when it came, was everything Henry had planned it to be: spectacular, devastating, and completely effective. The eastern wall of the 40th floor collapsed in a cascade of concrete and steel, taking with it any evidence of Julius's involvement and leaving behind only the tragic remains of 2 people who had tried to destroy him. Chapter 6: The Final Blueprint. The aftermath of the explosion played out exactly as Julius had orchestrated. The media reported it as a tragic accident during a routine inspection, a gas leak that had been sabotaged by a known criminal with ties to insurance fraud. Detective Walsh, who had worked with Julius on several construction site thefts over the years, found the evidence exactly where Julius had suggested he look. Henry Jackson's criminal background came to light within hours. Caroline's participation in the embezzlement scheme was discovered through financial records that Julius's people had carefully preserved and anonymously leaked to the police. The insurance company, faced with clear evidence of attempted fraud, not only refused to pay out on the building damage, but also launched their own investigation into previous claims. Julius stood in his study that evening, watching the news coverage on multiple screens. Sarah sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm, the first physical contact they'd shared since her return that felt like daughter and father, rather than survivor and rescuer. "Do you feel guilty?" Sarah asked quietly. Julius considered the question seriously. "Do you feel guilty for surviving when they wanted you dead?" "No," Sarah said immediately. "I fought for 3 years to live, to get back home, to warn you." "Then you understand," Julius replied. "They made their choice when they decided my family was expendable. I simply made sure the consequences matched the crime." His phone buzzed with a text from Glenn. "Site cleaned. All equipment accounted for. Ready for Phase 2. Phase 2. Julius had been planning it since the moment he'd learned the full scope of Caroline and Henry's betrayal. It wasn't enough that they were dead. Their network, the people who had helped them, the ones who had looked the other way while they stole from him and plotted murder, all of them needed to understand the price of crossing Julius Holt. "Sarah," Julius said, "I want you to see something." He led her to his home office, where a large monitor displayed a complex organizational chart. Names, photos, and connection lines filled the screen like a spider web of complicity. "This is everyone who was involved, either directly or indirectly, in what happened to you." Caroline's sister Debbie, who helped set up the offshore accounts. The marina owner who falsified the boat inspection records. The Coast Guard officer who was paid to limit the search area. The insurance adjuster who was going to rubber stamp the claim after my death. Sarah studied the chart, her expression hardening as she recognized some of the names. What are you going to do to them? What I do to anyone who threatens my family, Julius replied. I'm going to destroy them. Methodically, completely, legally, where possible. Otherwise, where necessary. The plan was already in motion. Debbie Whitaker would find her nursing license suspended due to an anonymous tip about drug theft from her hospital. The marina owner would face federal charges for safety violations that Julius's lawyers had spent the day documenting. The Coast Guard officer's gambling debts would suddenly be called in by some very unfriendly creditors. But first, Julius continued, I want to show you something else. He pulled up another file, architectural drawings for a new project. A memorial park on the site where Sarah had been found, with a community center that would provide survival training and boat safety courses for young people. I'm calling it Sarah's Sanctuary, Julius said. A place where kids can learn the skills you use to survive. Skills that might save their lives if someone ever tries to hurt them the way Caroline and Henry hurt you. Sarah studied the plans, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition. This was how Julius showed love. Through action, through building something lasting, through making sure the tragedy couldn't happen to someone else. Dad, she said finally, I want to help. With the memorial, but also with the other thing. The people who helped them. Julius looked at his daughter, really looked at her for the first time since her return. The scared 16-year-old was gone, replaced by someone harder, more focused. Someone who understood that justice wasn't always pretty, but it was always necessary. You've already helped, he said. More than you know. But if you want to be part of what comes next, you need to understand something. Once we start down this path, there's no going back. No mercy, no second chances, no forgiveness for anyone who stood against us. Sarah's expression was steel. They tried to kill me, Dad. They watched me disappear and never looked back. Why would I want to show them mercy? Julius smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in 3 years. His daughter had survived more than just the island. She'd survived the betrayal, the abandonment, the knowledge that her own mother had wanted her dead. And now she was ready to help him ensure that no one would ever mistake the Holt family for easy prey again. Then let's get to work, he said, opening a secure laptop. We have a lot of people to remind about the importance of loyalty. Chapter 7. The Foundation's Revenge. 3 months after the explosion, Julius Holt's methodical destruction of Caroline and Henry's network was proceeding with the precision of a master demolition. Each target fell in carefully orchestrated sequence, like dominoes arranged by an expert hand. Debbie Whitaker discovered the power of Julius's reach when her nursing license was suspended pending investigation of drug theft allegations. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Security footage that showed her in areas she shouldn't have been, testimony from patients about missing pain medication, financial records that suggested a gambling addiction that needed funding. None of it was fabricated, but Julius's investigators had been thorough in finding every thread and pulling it tight. Please, Debbie begged during the phone call Julius took in his office. I know what you think, but I barely helped Caroline. Just opened a bank account, that's all. I didn't know what it was for. You opened 17 bank accounts, Julius replied, reading from the file his investigators had compiled. In 4 different states. Using false identification documents that you obtained through your hospital's administrative access. You facilitated the theft of nearly $2 million from my company. I needed the money. My daughter's medical bills. Your daughter has been healthy for 3 years, Julius interrupted. The medical bills you showed Caroline were falsified to gain her sympathy and justify your participation. You were paid $60,000 for your services, which you spent on a vacation home in Florida. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough for Julius to review the next item on his list. The marina owner, Wes Miller, was scheduled for his federal hearing next week. The Coast Guard officer, Tomas Carter, had already been arrested for accepting bribes and falsifying search records. What do you want? Debbie finally whispered. I want you to understand something, Julius said. You helped plan my daughter's murder. You facilitated the theft of my money. You participated in a conspiracy to kill me. The fact that you're only losing your career instead of your life is a mercy I'm extending exactly once." Julius hung up without waiting for a response. Mercy, in his experience, was a finite resource that should be used sparingly and strategically. Sarah entered his office carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder marked Phase 3. At 19, she had become his most trusted advisor. Her survival instincts honed by 3 years alone had translated into an uncanny ability to read people and situations. "Wes Miller wants to make a deal," she reported, settling into the chair across from his desk. "He's willing to testify about everyone who was paid to look the other way during the boat inspections. And in exchange, he wants immunity from prosecution and relocation assistance." Julius considered this. Miller's testimony could bring down several more conspirators, but it would also mean one of the people responsible for Sarah's disappearance would escape justice. "What do you think?" he asked his daughter. Sarah's expression was thoughtful. "I think his testimony could help us reach the people who really matter. The ones who made it possible for Mom and Henry to operate for so long without being caught." She opened the folder and spread out surveillance photos across Julius's desk. "While you were dealing with the small fish, I've been tracking the bigger ones. Look at this." The photos showed a series of meetings between Caroline and a woman Julius didn't recognize, an elegant brunette in expensive clothes, photographed in restaurants, hotels, and private clubs. "Her name is Antonia Hawkins," Sarah continued. "She runs a consulting firm that specializes in insurance fraud and identity theft." Caroline wasn't her only client. She's been running similar schemes for at least 5 years, helping wealthy women dispose of inconvenient family members while accessing their assets. Julius studied the photos with growing interest. This was bigger than he'd imagined, not just a personal betrayal, but part of a professional operation that had probably destroyed dozens of families. "How many clients does she have currently?" he asked. 12 active cases that I could identify. All of them follow the same pattern: wealthy older men with younger wives who have children from previous marriages. The wives connect with Antonia through social clubs or charity organizations. Within a year, there's always a tragic accident that eliminates the stepchildren, followed by another accident that kills the husband. Julius felt a familiar cold fury settling over him. This wasn't just about his family. It was about a systematic predator who viewed families like his as hunting grounds. "Where is Antonia Hawkins now?" "She's hosting a charity gala tomorrow night. Private club, very exclusive. Most of her current clients will be there." Sarah placed an invitation on the desk, elegantly engraved cardstock that announced a fundraiser for maritime safety education. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "How did you get this?" Sarah's smile was sharp. "I convinced one of her clients that I was a potential new mark. Rich young widow, looking for advice on managing my inheritance. She was very eager to introduce me to her financial advisor." Julius looked at his daughter with pride and something approaching awe. 3 years of survival had taught her to think like a predator, to identify threats and opportunities with the same instincts that had kept her alive on the island. "Phase 3, he asked. "We attend the gala. We identify all of her current operations. And then we shut down the entire network, permanently." Julius began planning immediately. This wouldn't be like the targeted elimination of Caroline and Henry. This would require something more sophisticated, more comprehensive. But it would also provide the perfect opportunity to send a message to anyone else who might consider targeting his family. "Sarah," he said, "I want you to understand something. What we're planning isn't just revenge anymore. It's prevention. We're going to make sure this never happens to another family." "I know, Dad. That's why I want to do it right." Julius nodded, already visualizing the evening ahead. Tomorrow night, Antonia Hawkins and her clients would gather to celebrate their success at destroying families. But they would leave understanding that some predators were more dangerous than others, and that the Holt family was not prey. Chapter 8: The Predator's Ball. The Golden Coast Club represented everything Julius despised about the wealthy elite: inherited money masquerading as sophistication, privilege worn like armor against accountability. As he and Sarah entered the marble-columned ballroom, Julius surveyed the crowd with the same calculating attention he'd once reserved for hostile takeover meetings. Antonia Hawkins held court near the orchestra, surrounded by women who wore diamonds like weapons and smiles like masks. She was exactly as Sarah had described: elegant, confident, and radiating the kind of predatory charm that drew victims into carefully laid traps. "She's already spotted us," Sarah murmured, adjusting the vintage Cartier bracelet that concealed a sophisticated recording device. Third woman from the left is Kelly Compton, her newest client. Husband owns a shipping company, 2 stepchildren who died in a boating accident last month. Julius noted the woman's practiced grief expression, the way she touched her jewelry when speaking about her loss. All the signs of someone playing a role rather than living a tragedy. "Mr. Holt." Antonia's voice carried perfectly across the conversation, drawing them into her orbit with practiced ease. "What an unexpected pleasure. I was so sorry to hear about your recent losses." "Thank you," Julius replied, allowing just the right amount of pain to show in his expression. "Sarah and I are still adjusting to life without Caroline. It's been difficult. I can only imagine. The sudden nature of it all, and so soon after getting your daughter back. Fate can be incredibly cruel." Sarah stepped closer to her father, playing the role of grieving daughter with an authenticity that came from lived experience. "We're trying to focus on positive things. Dad's memorial project has been very healing." "Memorial project?" Antonia's interest sharpened. "A maritime safety center," Julius explained. "Teaching survival skills, boat safety, emergency preparedness. We want to make sure other families don't have to go through what we did." The conversation continued with the polite surface exchanges of high society, but Julius was reading the subtext. Antonia was evaluating them, trying to determine if Julius might be a potential client for her services. A wealthy widower with a surviving child could be valuable, especially if the child could be convinced that her father's new wife deserved loyalty. As the evening progressed, Julius and Sarah circulated through the crowd, identifying Antonia's network with surgical precision. 12 women who had lost stepchildren to convenient accidents. 8 men who had recently married younger women and would probably join their stepchildren within a year. 3 lawyers who specialized in expedited probate proceedings. A private investigator who provided surveillance services. A yacht broker who sold boats with hidden structural weaknesses. The scope of the operation was staggering. Antonia had built an entire ecosystem of predators, each playing their role in a machine designed to destroy families and transfer wealth. Conservative estimates suggested they had stolen over $50 million and murdered at least 30 people in the past 5 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Antonia announced from the small stage near the orchestra, "thank you all for joining us tonight to support maritime safety education. As many of you know, this cause is deeply personal to those of us who have lost loved ones to tragic boating accidents." The applause was polite, practiced, obscene in its hypocrisy. Julius felt Sarah's hand slip into his, a gesture that looked like comfort but felt like solidarity. They were surrounded by killers who wore charity galas like camouflage. "Before we conclude this evening," Antonia continued, "I'd like to share some exciting news. Our foundation has identified a new partner who will help us expand our reach significantly. A man whose recent personal tragedy has inspired him to ensure that other families receive the protection they deserve." Julius realized with cold clarity that Antonia was about to announce his participation in her network. She had misread his interest, interpreted his questions about maritime safety as an expression of desire to join her organization. The predator had mistaken the hunter for prey. "Mr. Julius Holt has agreed to serve as our new chairman of operations," Antonia announced, gesturing toward him with triumph. His experience in construction and his recent personal losses make him uniquely qualified to help us build a safer future for families everywhere. The applause was enthusiastic now, welcoming him into their circle of killers. Julius rose slowly, walking toward the stage with the measured pace of a man accepting a burden he didn't want but couldn't refuse. "Thank you," he said into the microphone, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom. "Antonia is right that my recent experiences have been educational. I've learned things about trust, about loyalty, about the price of betrayal that I never expected to learn." He paused, letting his eyes sweep across the crowd, making contact with each of Antonia's clients in turn. "I've learned that some people view families like mine as opportunities rather than relationships. They see trust as weakness, love as vulnerability, and loyalty as something to be exploited for profit." Antonia's smile was beginning to waver as she heard something in Julius's tone that didn't match her expectations. But I've also learned that predators make a fundamental mistake when they choose their prey. They assume that wealth makes people soft, that grief makes them weak, that loss makes them vulnerable. Julius reached into his jacket and withdrew a thick envelope, placing it on the podium in front of him. Tonight, I want to share with you the results of 3 months of investigation into Antonia Hawkins and her associates. Bank records, audio recordings, surveillance footage, and detailed documentation of every murder, every theft, every destroyed family that has funded your comfortable lifestyle. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Several people rushed toward the exits. Others pulled out phones to make frantic calls, and Antonia herself stepped backward as if she could distance herself from the unfolding disaster. But Julius had planned for this moment with the same attention to detail he'd once used to coordinate complex construction projects. The exits were blocked by federal agents who had been waiting outside. Cell phone signals were being jammed by equipment Sarah had helped him install. Every conversation in the room was being recorded by devices his security team had placed hours earlier. The FBI will be taking statements from everyone in this room, Julius continued calmly. Those of you who cooperate fully will be treated according to your level of participation. Those who attempt to flee or destroy evidence will be treated as accessories to murder. As federal agents flooded into the ballroom, Julius stepped down from the stage and walked directly to Antonia Hawkins, who stood frozen in the center of the chaos. You made one critical error, he told her quietly. You assumed I was grieving for my wife. But Caroline stopped being my wife the moment she decided my daughter should die. I wasn't grieving. I was hunting. Chapter 9. The Foundation Stands. 6 months later, Julius stood in the completed memorial park where Sarah had first been found by the Coast Guard. The community center rose behind him, its clean lines and open spaces designed to welcome rather than intimidate. Children's laughter echoed from the boat's safety training area, where teenagers learned the skills that might save their lives if they ever found themselves alone on the water. The Antonia Hawkins case had made national headlines for weeks. 37 people had been arrested in what prosecutors called the largest organized insurance fraud conspiracy in federal history. Antonia herself was serving life without parole for 15 counts of first-degree murder. Her clients and associates had received sentences ranging from 25 years to life, depending on their level of participation. The money recovered from their network, over $60 million, had been used to establish victim compensation funds and expand maritime safety programs across the country. Julius's foundation now operated 12 training centers in coastal communities, teaching survival skills to thousands of young people every year. Dad, Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. She approached carrying a tablet displaying the latest enrollment statistics. At 20, she had become the foundation's director of operations, bringing the same survival instincts that had kept her alive on the island to the work of preventing similar tragedies. The Phoenix Center is at full capacity, she reported. They're requesting approval to expand the program to include wilderness survival training. Julius nodded, reviewing the proposal on her tablet. The expansion made sense. Many of Antonia's victims had been killed in remote locations where basic survival skills could have made the difference between life and death. Approve it, he said. But I want you to oversee the curriculum development personally. Make sure they're teaching real skills, not just theory. Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her face from serious administrator to proud daughter. I've already started working on it. I want to include a module on recognizing when someone is trying to isolate you from your support system. Early warning signs of predatory behavior. It was exactly the kind of thinking that made Julius proud of the woman his daughter had become. She had taken the worst experience of her life and transformed it into a shield for others. No one would ever again be able to claim they didn't know the warning signs, didn't understand the dangers, didn't have the skills to survive when predators came hunting. Sir, Glenn Pierce approached from the parking area, his expression neutral, but his posture suggesting news that required privacy. We have a situation that needs your attention. Julius followed Glenn away from the crowds of families visiting the memorial park. In the past 6 months, Glenn's role had evolved from enforcer to security coordinator, helping to protect both the foundation's work and the people who had testified against Antonia's network. What is it? Julius asked. Kelly Compton was found dead in her cell this morning. Apparent suicide, but the timing is suspicious. She was scheduled to testify next week in the civil cases against her husband's estate. Julius absorbed this information without surprise. Prison was dangerous for people who had targeted children, and Kelly had been one of Antonia's most active clients. But the timing suggested something more deliberate than prisoner justice. Who had access to her cell? That's the interesting part, Glenn replied. The guard who found her has a brother who worked for Henry Jackson 5 years ago. Lost his job when Henry moved his operation to your company. Julius felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him. Even dead, Henry Jackson's network continued to pose threats. People who had been overlooked in the initial investigation, relatives, and associates who might blame Julius for the destruction of their criminal enterprise. How many others are there? Julius asked. We've identified 17 people with connections to either Henry's previous operations or Antonia's network who weren't caught in the initial arrests. Some of them have been making inquiries about you and Sarah, testing your security, probing for weaknesses. Julius looked back toward the memorial park, where his daughter was teaching a group of children how to identify edible plants. The work they were doing was important, necessary, life-saving. But it also made them visible, created patterns that enemies could study and exploit. Glenn, Julius said quietly, I want you to activate the contingency protocols. Full security for Sarah and the Foundation staff. And I want complete background checks on everyone who has shown interest in our operations. Donors, volunteers, media contacts, everyone. Already in progress, Glenn confirmed. But there's something else you should know. 3 of Henry's former associates have been meeting regularly at a restaurant downtown. They seem to be planning something. Julius wasn't surprised. In his experience, cutting off a snake's head was only the first step. The body could continue to move for a long time afterward, striking at anything that came within range. Names, he asked. Salvador Foley, Harold Sweeney, and Bert Perkins. Small-time operators who worked security for Henry's cons. They blame you for the end of their income stream. Julius memorized the names, already beginning to plan. These men weren't sophisticated like Antonia's network, but they were desperate and angry, which made them dangerous in different ways. They would need to be dealt with before they could threaten Sarah or the Foundation's work. Set up surveillance, Julius instructed. I want to know their plans before they finalize them. And Glenn? When we move against them, I want it to be permanent. I'm tired of dealing with Henry Jackson's legacy. As they walked back toward the memorial center, Julius reflected on the strange, circular nature of justice. He had started this journey seeking revenge for the betrayal of his family. He had achieved that revenge completely, destroying not just Caroline and Henry, but the entire network that had enabled their crimes. But the work wasn't finished. It might never be finished. There would always be predators who saw families like his as prey, always be people who mistook kindness for weakness and wealth for vulnerability. The difference now was that Julius understood his role clearly. He wasn't just a businessman or a father. He was a hunter, using his resources and ruthlessness to protect not just his own family, but all the families who couldn't protect themselves. Sarah rejoined him as the sun set over the memorial park, her face flushed with enthusiasm from the day's teaching. How many today? Julius asked. 43 kids learned basic boat safety. 15 completed the advanced survival course. And we had 3 families sign up for the wilderness program. Julius nodded, satisfied. 43 children who would be harder to kill. 15 young people who could survive on their own if predators came hunting. 3 families who would recognize the warning signs before it was too late. Dad, Sarah said as they walked toward their car. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had just let it go? If we had just been grateful I survived and tried to move on? Julius considered the question seriously. Other families would have died. Antonia's network would have continued operating. Henry's associates would have found new partners. The cycle would have continued. So you don't regret it? Any of it? Julius looked back at the memorial park one last time, seeing families gathering around picnic tables, children playing safely under the watchful eyes of trained staff, young people learning skills that might save their lives someday. I regret that it was necessary, he said finally. But I don't regret doing what had to be done. Some people only understand force, Sarah. Some threats can only be eliminated, not negotiated with or forgiven. As they drove away from the memorial park, Julius's phone buzzed with a message from Glenn, surveillance in place. Should have their plans within 48 hours. Julius deleted the message and smiled. Let Henry Jackson's remaining associates make their move. They would discover the same truth that Caroline, Henry, and Antonia Hawkins had learned, that Julius Holt protected his family completely, ruthlessly, and without mercy for anyone foolish enough to threaten them. The foundation would continue its work. Sarah would help more children learn to survive. And Julius would continue hunting the predators who saw families as prey. Some foundations, he reflected, were built on forgiveness and second chances. But the strongest foundations were built on the understanding that some lines, once crossed, led to permanent consequences. The Holt family foundation was built to last.